So thanks everybody for joining today for Podcasting 101, our first of two conversations on how to start your own podcast. Obviously, you all saw podcast listening has grown tremendously, not just in the past few years, but especially during quarantine because it's a unique format that just fits into our busy lives, and especially seeing growth in the topics of self-improvement, health, and fitness. So today we gathered the pros with diehard followings to give us a little bit of the behind-the-scenes look at how to get your own podcast started. We'll be learning from their stories. And so without further ado, I'm actually going to have them go through their podcast spiel, that reel at the beginning. We'll start with Kristen, move on to Two Fit Crazies, and then Soulfit Labs. So I'll let y'all introduce yourselves.
Okay, hi guys. My name is Kirsten Potenza. I own a company called Pound, which is a workout. We started about 10 years ago, and we have about over 20,000 instructors now who teach around the world. And about 2 years ago, after wanting to do it for many, many years, we launched the Big Green Couch, which was our long form format and way to bring in people that we call noisemakers from around the world, and most importantly from different industries, to pick their brains and learn from them. I really believe that some of the best conversations are the ones that you have, on a couch over a glass of wine. So we've kind of handpicked some really special people to be on the podcast and bring to our community.
Rock on. Brian, Christine, what's up?
It is Christine Conti.
And I'm Brian Prendergast.
And we are Two Fit Crazies.
And a microphone.
We are where it's at. So, hi everyone. I know I've taken your Pound class before. I always lurk. No one ever knows who I am. I'm very, very mysterious. So we have been at it. I think we've probably been at it for the longest, I think we're the old people in this conversation today, which is totally fine.
Not sure. 162 episodes.
Yeah, almost. We're getting to 200 folks in right now. It's changed our lives. I don't know what we're talking about. Podcasting has changed our lives. And about less than 3 years ago, I was making the kind of transition from teaching to full-time fitness. And Brian and I kind of were acquaintances, and we were talking, and I'm like, I want to do a podcast. And he's like, I'm in. And meanwhile, I'd not even listened to podcasts. I just knew that it was where it's at. I knew that it was where it was going in the fitness industry, and I've been in for like 20 years, part-time and now full-time. And I knew that if there's no platform, you create your own. And no one was going to walk in and say to us, hey, you want to be the news anchor? You want to have your own show on like NBC? So damn it, we did it ourselves. And we have had the most unbelievable experiences, networking, marketing. You go, Brian.
I am the opposite of Christine. I'm a podcast geek. At the time that we started speaking, I was probably listening to 20 podcasts.
Thank God,
weekly.
Yin to my yang over here.
I was like, I'm in, and I had planned on doing something, at some point with podcasting, and then Christine and I, sat down and discussed it, and we were like, that's it, let's do it. And as they say, the rest is history. We've done quite a few, and and it's been the greatest networking tool that we could have ever imagined it to be.
Yeah.
And now we teach courses around the country. Like we said, like we do podcasting 101 and help people leverage their brands and use other people's podcasts. It's amazing, and all of you guys on here right now, like I'm applauding you because this is big, and you're changing the world. You're making waves. So keep it up.
Woo! Soulfit.
Hey, you guys. My name is Steven.
And I'm Laura.
And we have a brand called Soulfit Labs, podcast of the same name. And our story is a little bit convoluted, I feel like, but both of us have been in fitness for about a decade now, doing everything from PT to group fitness, sort of all across the board. So if you've taken like various bootcamp classes or Equinox or Pilates, spin, what have you, we've taught kind of like all across the map. Amira, you and I actually met at Equinox training, which was really cool. We learned how to spin together. And I guess like the impetus for the podcast was really just like taking, we met 3 years ago, by the way. Just throw that in there. Then that's sort of when the idea for the podcast started 3 years ago. And we were both in fitness, and we sort of just said, hey, we worked at all these places and we know sort of the ins and outs of different training methods and different techniques. And we have a lot of our own ideas. So why not just take what we've already done, put it together, and sort of create our own thing, our own brand. So Soulfit really was born out of that. And it was just this idea of holistic health, holistic fitness. How do you put your diet, your nutrition, your training, and the mindset behind it all, which we believe is the biggest piece, and tie it all together into something that sort of encapsulates a Soulfit lifestyle. And that's really, really our message. That's what we try to get across in each and every episode.
And if you guys didn't catch that, he said 3 years ago. So we met 3 years ago. We first met, we were like, let's start a podcast. And it took us 3 years to get started, but not because we were trying that whole time, but really just, you know, the way that life turned out. This January, my New Year's goals was to finally start that podcast. And when we actually said, okay, we put a deadline to it, let's do this, it happened in that month. So yes. We're probably the newest on this conversation, but yeah, we're glad to be here and learn from all of you guys as well.
So there you have it. New Year's resolutions aren't always completely worthless.
They work.
Great. So I want to dig into, I think this is really interesting, and you all led into really the first question for this conversation here, which is like how long these ideas for a podcast were brewing. I think even in listening to one of Kirsten's episodes in the Big Green Couch, this idea of perfectionism or really, you know, having a solidified idea came up as like a big thing that gets in people's way, that can have them marinate for years or not even have an idea come to fruition. So I wanted to dig into really like that tipping point. If some of you were thinking about this for years, I mean, maybe for Two Fit Crazies and a mic, it was really that conversation about like, hey, want to do a podcast? Yes, let's do it. But like, take us behind your thought process and that tipping point. We'll go in the same order.
That's a really good question. I think for me, the podcast was always going to be a supportive factor to our community. So I really believe that fitness isn't just about fitness. It's about lifestyle. It's about your values. It's about who you are as a human. And so we built Pound to really be something that, of course, lived within the group fitness realm, but also we all know this, that when you walk into the group fitness room, you're walking in with who you are, what you're going through. And so we wanted to create a platform that supported that. And so I probably have wanted to do it for about 6 years, but I'm a really big believer in timing. And for us, it felt when we did it, it was just the perfect timing. Our community had grown to a certain point, and we wanted to find ways to support them in other ways than we already had. So it just felt right, and we knew it was time. The name was there. We knew what we were going to do for such a long time. But I would say this for anybody. I think so many people have incredible ideas, and they usually have ideas because they feel like they need it or their community needs it. And it's so hard to begin, but I think you have to think about what you're scared of. And with a podcast, it's, will anybody listen? The reality is that no, nobody will probably listen to the first episode or the second one, and then you'll trickle in, but it's about building it. And I think that's where you have to be fearless when you start something, and know that people want it and need it in their lives if you want it and need it in your life.
The need point. Christine, Brian, same, right. Different?
So being someone that has been presenting, you know, in Canada and the United States, you know, for the really being out there and being a presenter, I've seen in the last 20 years that, you know, so many companies are out there have just, they don't have the money, they don't have the funding to really market their ideas. And some of their ideas are freaking amazing. And they fizzle. They go away, or things on the West Coast we never even hear of over here on the East Coast that might be amazing, and vice versa. So this kind of came out of, how could we somehow provide other people with something? Because again, and I'm going to be honest, one more person asked me about an oil or a freaking, whatever. Okay, I'm good, everybody. Stop asking me for things. You know what the best thing is when you can provide a service for someone, when you can offer something to them. And I said, you know what, there's a need to get unbiased information about health, about wellness, about fitness. Brian and I are very passionate about, helping people, living their best lives, as cheesy as that sounds. But if one more freaking person told me about, hey, I need to lose 5 pounds. My boyfriend told me to do keto. I'm like, you don't even know what ketosis is. How do we get this unbiased information? So being friends with all of these people, the movers, the shakers, the top exercise scientists and companies in the world, I said, you know what? I'm going to get these people on the show, and they are going to speak to the masses. And that is how we're going to start. Brian and I are fitness and nutrition and wellness, and we're going to stay in that wheelhouse. And that's really how it started. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, very much to that point. But I think for people, it's hard to express yourself in a gym setting, right? You can have that group of people that are always seeing you all the time, and they can get to know you. Or you can have a blog, or, do Instagram lives and things. Actually, when we started this, that was kind of not even a thing, right? So you can do all those things and kind of get people to know you, or in other words, you can express yourself in that way. But we had a lot to say, so we wanted to kind of go after it and let people hear what we were saying, and then bring people on that, in a fun way, right? We wanted to do it. We don't want it to be some technical,
But that's not us. Some podcasts are totally geeking out on, molecules.
Which is great. I listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to them. But, for us, we wanted to do it in a fun way. We wanted to bring on our friends. We wanted to, kind of just let people have their voice just as way as we were having our voice with the podcast. So for me, that's kind of what it is.
Within the wheelhouse, though. It wasn't we wanted fitness inspiration. And
that's the best thing. We don't have to be experts on anything. Yeah. We can bring on the experts and let them be the experts.
We have 200 hours worth of free content that people have brought us. It's like going to, spending thousands of dollars for self-help, yet people come to us and we talk and we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
That is super fascinating. Super fascinating. I love those nuggets there. Soulfit.
Oh, it's muted. There you go.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you guys brought up the most important points. Kristen, if I'm saying your name right, that the fact that it just comes down to asking yourself, what is it that I'm afraid of? Why haven't I started? If I have this idea, what is it that's holding me back? And actually for me, I, in January, linked up with a coach who was an old friend of mine who is a mindset coach. Her name is Amy Park. And she and I did a trade. So I helped her with some meal planning and some coaching, and she helped me with some mindset coaching. And it was in that mindset coaching that she asked me those questions of what are some self-limiting beliefs that you have? And it really did come down to that imposter syndrome of feeling like I wasn't an expert, and feeling even though I'm so passionate about this fitness stuff, what really do I have to offer people? And I had to overcome that fear of not being good enough to share my knowledge, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to start setting a deadline to it, making it a goal. And luckily, we have each other. It makes it so much easier to have someone else holding you accountable. And then, that we gave ourselves a deadline of January 21st or something like that.
It was January 20th, and we were 2 days late.
2 days late. But we did it. We got it started. And then since then, it's just about being consistent after that and continuing with it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and Laura kind of already said this, is, fear that nobody's going to listen. And you say this to me all the time. But if you have something to say and you have something to say, then treat it like it's for just one person. If it's one person listening to your podcast, then you're successful. You have something to say and you're impacting someone's life. So sort of having that mindset and saying hey, we're just going to share. And whoever this impacts, if it's one, if it's 1,000, if it's more, then phenomenal. We're just going to do it. Now's the time.
I think that's really powerful. I think we can, with all the likes and the shares in social media, we can get really wrapped up in the millions of views, the millions of listens. But, thinking about how your story or your moment can just impact even one person, and if you've changed their lives, that's really powerful. I wanted to, this has come up a little bit, but the concept of a name, this is a highly tactical topic, but if you got something to say, I know for Two Fit Crazies, it's like maybe a little bit, a little bit more straightforward, but how did you come up with the names for your podcasts?
Are we going in any order here?
Let's go in reverse order.
Okay. So the name, it sort of came out of a business name that I'd had in the back of my mind for like 5 years. So originally it was Soul Science Labs, which evolved into Soulfit. And the reason behind Soulfit is obviously the big part of it. And my answer is not going to be concise here. So if Laura has something better to say, she can jump in. But my feeling behind it, my thinking behind it was, well, health is first and foremost about how you feel about you. And a lot of times we focus more on how other people see us, and we base our own feelings on ourselves on, external validation. And Soulfit is a holistic health platform. So we believe in the mindset, the nutrition, and the physical training. But in order to do any of those, those latter two things successfully, the nutrition and the physical training, you have to start from a place of, a healthy mindset, self-love. And that's really the soul. That's the heart and the soul of all of it. So that was the soul benefit that's, underlies everything. So like I said, not concise, but.
I like it.
Oh,
Thank you.
I think it's fantastic.
5 years of thinking and you just crunch it down into a minute. I think you're doing a pretty dang good job.
Two Fit Crazies and a microphone. We stole it from Beck. We got Two Fit Crazies and a microphone. Where it's at? We had a couple different things that we were bouncing around. I don't even know if you remember this. I wanted it to be tell me something good, right? So like tell me something good. But it ended up. But then that wasn't like kind of fitness. And no one's crazier than Christine or fitter. So I said
Crazy at least.
Crazy and fit crazy. And I was
look at yourself. I mean,
no, it works. And I was in the car one day, and on Sirius Radio, Beck came on, and it was like Two Fit Crazies and a microphone.
Brian's like, Christine, what do you think about this? I think I got her name. I'm like, I'm in, totally in. I've seen Beck in concert a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're kids from the 80s and 90s, right? So
I speak for yourself.
Right.
I'm like
touch
22.
Touch over. And so there are some people that don't get it, right? There are some people, but that's all right. So we're where it's at. We're Two Fit Crazy on microphone. That's the long and short of it.
Mm-hmm.
Concise.
Nice. Music inspired. I dig.
Yeah.
Myself. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
I muted myself because I had to cough. I love both of those names. I think they're incredible. I think the Soul Lab. I've always loved when anybody's used the word lab in the name, because I feel like it symbolizes evolution and changing and learning. So I dig both of those. So we called our podcast The Big Green Couch because I really believe, and I'm sure all of us can agree, that there's been so many conversations I've had with friends and loved ones and people I've met in the industry where I've ended it and said, man, I wish somebody else could have heard that, because I took so much from it and learned so much from it and became so inspired because of it. So we wanted the podcast to feel like a conversation you have on your couch over, a glass of wine or whatever that may be. And we also, and I'm staring at both of them right now, have two very large, big green velvet couches in our office here in LA. And that's where we interview people when they come into our office. So hopefully they feel just as comfortable and with that one-on-one conversation. And our brand color is also green, so it all fits.
Nice. That actually leads into our next question really well, which is on format. I think when people are, going through and listening to podcasts, they might not be aware of it, but there are all kinds of different ways to craft that podcast. Some are investigative journalism, some are more story driven and narrative driven, some are monologues, and others are interviews. You have conversational style interviews, you have informational style interviews. In Soulfit's case, you've played around with different formats. Some of those are conversations between you two, and others are more interview style. So yeah, getting into the choice behind which format and even playing with formats, as well as how that affects your planning process. And maybe it's a content calendar, maybe it's more spur of the moment than that. And we'll start, since Kirsten brought it up, with the big green couch. These are really personal and intimate conversations where I feel like I'm on Kirsten's couch with Kirsten's friends, and it's a little bit different from your average typical interview format, and you're thinking around that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's two things that I wanted to make sure we did when we did the big green couch. One of them, and I don't know if you guys agree, but I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and I have a lot of people that I love to listen to. Esther Perel is one of my favorite people. I love her podcast, and I love listening to her on other people's podcasts. But what I noticed with a lot of them, especially people who I heard through multiple podcasts or platforms, is they were being asked almost the same questions. And I get why, because it's usually their comfort zone. It's what they're experts in. But I felt like I was listening to the same interview over and over again. So one of the things we do for the Big Green Couch is we have a pre-interview with our guest. And I simply say, what are things that you want to talk about that light you up? Because for me, I know that there might be something a month ago that I was so passionate about talking about that, but that might change, in the next month. So, and in those pre-conversations, I come up with some of my best questions for them that I wouldn't have thought of if we were just one-on-one asking questions that, I thought were good to ask. So that's one thing that we do to make sure that the guest is comfortable, but also speaking to things that really light them up and excite them. And then, I wanted it to be conversational. I wanted it to feel comfortable. I wanted people to feel like they were in the room with us, which is why we actually sit on the big green couch. So those were two things that we did to make sure it hopefully felt like that.
And on formatting, I noticed that some of the episodes have a live audience, some are recorded with video, so they're not just an audio and listening experience. I think that's pretty unique. Obviously, there's some other podcasts that do that, but what are some of the planning considerations that go into that? What does it take that makes it different? Is it something that you would recommend?
Not when you start, because it's a lot more difficult when you have to include a camera person, microphones, lighting. We did the very first episode of the Big Green Couch live with 3 panelists, which I would highly recommend. I think more than one person is sometimes a really interesting way to experience it, but I also like the one-on-one approach. I would say that if you're trying to mix it up and try different things, absolutely do so, but you don't have to have it be visual. At Pound, we are a very visual program, and everything we do, we want people to see. So we kind of messed around with what that looks like and how it changes the feel. But ultimately, I think the best thing about long form podcasts is that you don't have to look at anybody. You could be on the road, you can be driving to work. So I think that in its most basic form is where I would start. But it's certainly fun and exciting to try different formats, and adding more people to your guest list is also really great.
Rock on. For Brian and Christine, I know a lot of that, 200 episodes deep, interview style. bringing in friends, bringing in people who are more of acquaintances. Yeah, tell us about how you plan that, how you budget that. I mean, that's super prolific. It just seems really, really difficult.
I think, but you know what, when you said friends though, Brian, you have to remember that a lot of the friends that we bring in are also like people that are pretty well, like pretty accomplished or really,
even
fascinating, or
they've become friends.
Yes.
From being on the show, because we do have a very loose type of format. We bring people on, it's long form. We go, about an hour for each episode. And we try to book them at least for an hour, and sometimes we go over, sometimes we don't. But and we want to know their story. They come to us because they've got a product, or they've developed something, or they're into fitness, or books, or whatever it is. But that's just the book, right? So what's your story? Like, what do you do, and how did you get there, and what did you do, beforehand, and how did you get to the point where you're at now? And we get into life, like their lives. We get their story. Which we don't have a pre-scripted anything. There are times where
I do a lot of the booking, and I'll, sometimes people interview me just before they come on the show to see if I'm legit enough for them. I mean, that's really where it goes at some point when you start really getting up in the podcasting, like, top, CEOs or whatever. Are we going to give you the time of day? Sometimes, we were told we only had 15 minutes with one guy. And then he wound up taking, 40 minutes or something with us, because who knows if we were legit or not. It's really interesting. There's a lot that goes into this. But I think we don't give questions, and that irks people sometimes. I don't like it. And like Kristen, like you said, I don't like podcasts that are scripted like that. It's not me. Maybe it's what you enjoy, and that's okay.
We want to have like a completely extemporaneous conversation where it's like just like you're on the green couch, and we're just kicking it. But we get into some stuff. We had Connie Martin, was it?
Yeah.
She's a fitness woman. She's at Dance Fitness, and she's
Aqua, whatever. She's around forever.
She's been around a long time, and we get her on the show, and we find out that her ancestors made, her great grandmother made quilts that were actually maps to the Underground Railroad that was like freeing slaves.
Right.
So where's our conversation going now? Aqua Fitness is
okay. We get what you do. That's great. But now, like, bam.
Okay.
And don't you feel like every guest, I feel like, has a story, and that is what connects you to the reader, and you to the listener. And it's crazy because Brian and I, we will be out and people will yell like "get crazy" at us, and we're like, who the hell is that? Or hey, Christine, blah blah blah. They'll mention someone, and I'm like, how do you know that about me? Oh, well, because it's just like television. They get sucked into that. Hey, we want to know more about this, and whether it's just the two of you talking, or just a guest. It really, you're letting people into a story, and that's what's so amazing.
People ask me, what's Christine really like?
Today? I don't.
No, I'm kidding. And I'm like, you got it. Like, that's it.
Amazing. And Stephen and Laura, you guys have played around, I think this is really interesting, played around with a lot of different formats. And in some cases, I know that with the big green couch and 2 Fit Crazies and a microphone, there's a heavy amount of interviews. But sometimes you guys are just like riffing on a topic like developing your core, and it's just you two. There's nobody that needs to be interviewed in the mix. And then in other cases, there's some shorter form, I mean, not like hyper short form podcasts, but a little bit shorter in the episodes, and even mini-series pieces on the same topic. So take us behind the scenes on some of the planning there and the choice making. I'm not unmute y'all again.
There we go.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't want to interrupt with some noises we were making. So, we've done a little bit of both. And I'd say, like, because we still are newer and within the first, 15 episodes of our podcast, we really tried to focus on just letting our audience get to know who we were as people. And I think while it is really interesting and so much fun to bring on other people, like, I love listening to interview style podcasts, it's important for your audience to get to know you first. And I think that just by going on there and, like you guys are saying, being ourselves, having a conversation with each other, is like really a great way for people to get to know us so much more so than when we're teaching them fitness or just having a short conversation with someone. So I feel like it's the best way to let people know who you are and your coaching style. And then from there, I think, you know, if you're ever looking to grow your podcast, the best way to do that is to bring on other people and let, you know, cross-pollinate your audiences and learn from each other. And we hope to continue doing more interview styles. It is harder because we've only done the interviews when the people are in person with us. So, you know, right now that's all on halt. But I'm still figuring out how the best way to do it long distance with interview style podcasting.
Yeah, and I think she kind of alluded to this, but it's a lot of it in initial stages is just like finding your individual voice too. And like this dynamic, I think this is one of your questions from later, Amira, actually, as far as surprises go. But we've been together for a long time and we've been teaching in front of people for a long time. We talk every day, obviously, but like getting on a microphone and like sitting across the table from each other and recording was like not natural at all to begin with. So like it was probably a good thing we didn't start with interviews, because we needed to like find our own dynamic and our own voice and play off each other first before we were really ready to bring anyone else in.
So what I'm hearing is it doesn't have to be totally perfect before getting started, and
Absolutely not.
in the process of finding and crafting your own voice, identifying your brand, even during the process after you've gotten started. Is that right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
If you're waiting for perfect, you'll be waiting forever.
We leave our very first episode up, and we've contemplated taking it down because it's horrible.
It's just the sound quality's horrible. It's just, you know.
We're just, you know, we're not hitting our rhythm yet, and you know, it's not great.
I would say the first, to what you were saying before, I would say that the first 10 episodes, not 10, maybe first 7 episodes or so were just us. And we would do, you know, our first episode was really like, who are you? Why are you Fit Crazies? And then it went into, you know, we did like a fun thing like WTF, what the fitness? We went over different fitness brands. WTF, what the food? And that would be kind of our main, you know, topic. But then, you know, you're playing back and forth with, you know, different stories. You could be yourself. And it wasn't for like at least a couple months that we brought someone on. And when we did, it was someone that we were comfortable with, so that it wasn't like, I don't really know you and this is weird. And, eventually when our guests got to be really solid, then we were more comfortable before we did something like that, I guess, so that we wouldn't embarrass ourselves.
But yes, just like fitness, that contemplation stage exists, and most people will stay there. And, you know, but there's not much to it. Imagine no one's going to listen to it and just do your thing, and that's the way it's going to go. And then you're going to be okay, because people are going to listen to it because it'll improve and everything will be good.
By the way, Amira, Morgan, I see that you guys have been on our show, and I'm sorry to say some of the people are like, hey, you know what? The best episodes are when it's just you and Brian. And we're like, really?
We still do it. We have to like actually plan it now. Cause, yeah.
Funny.
That's really helpful. And I, oftentimes when I think about business and even just prioritizing from an executive level, I think of the product side and I think of the community side. And I wanted to move on from thinking about the product and crafting the product and embedding that within community. And I know Kirsten started to touch on this a little bit, but the Big Green Couch exists in within a broader brand ecosystem, within a broader ecosystem of instructors and community and even their communities. And so I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit more into how the Big Green Couch fits within that ecosystem, the needs that it serves. So these are a couple of tidbits we started to unearth, but I wanted to dig into that deeper, embedding the Big Green Couch within the broader community.
That's a great question, and I'll almost shoot it back to a couple of things that you guys just said and have experienced. I think that the greatest experience in the beginning of Pound was being so messy and stumbling and having your early adopters be there along the way with you. And we have people who are in our community now who were in our community then. And it's never a comparison, right? When somebody goes back and listens to your first episode, they're like, oh my God, I remember when I listened to that. It's not like wow, you guys weren't so great back then. It's people love evolving with you and growing with you. And that's where community comes in, right? So the reason why I started Pound is because I didn't feel comfortable going to the gym. I'd been an athlete my whole life. I had grew up in an environment that very much felt like a family. It was supportive. I always had my team. And when I moved out of that realm and going to the gym, it personally just didn't feel as welcoming and as loving and as supportive as that team environment did. So I wanted to create an environment where people could walk into a room, as intimidated as they may feel or not, and feel a sense of family, feel a sense of community. Because ultimately, working out, being fit, moving makes our lives way, way, way better. But getting in that room is difficult for a lot of people around the world. So as instructors, we always say we have to honor that decision by making the class as incredible as it can be, but also supporting the lifestyle that happens outside of the group fitness room. And my favorite part of Pound is that people form friendships, they form support groups, they go to concerts together, they go to brunch after class. That's what it's all about. So when the Big Green Couch came about, it was really, how do we continue to support our community's lifestyle? And that's why we have, Reiki masters to wellness coaches to diversity consultants to group fitness managers on the Big Green Couch. There might be some guests that totally surprise you, and there might be some that totally feel like a fit, right, within the fitness industry. So community is really why we do everything that we do. And I think that that's the coolest thing about starting a podcast, is that it's easy, it's cheap compared to most things, and you can build a community and you can grow with a community by just being yourself. And they're going to stumble with you and they're going to grow with you and appreciate that. So I think that's a pretty exciting thing, which is why I love podcasts for two reasons. That's one. The second one is that it's long form and people don't listen to or read anything for longer than 5 minutes these days. And the fact that people still are makes me really, really happy.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've heard that when it comes to, for anybody who's thinking about ad placements, oftentimes those mid-roll ads in between those minutes, instead of the beginning ads, which is probably when, most people might think is the best place to place the ad, those middle ads are actually more engaged, which is really fascinating, considering that long form content is really hard generally for more people to consume in the broader scheme of things. I'm going to ask this in a little bit of a different way for Soulfit Labs. And I know that for you, I'm gathering that a lot of these topics that you pick are even crowdsourced from the trends and questions that you're hearing from your community. So you're bringing those pieces together. How do you know when a topic is like the right one to address for your community? Because you both have collectively thousands of followers and you're interacting with them every day. How do you know it's like ripe for a podcast?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think we very much operate that there isn't really a bad question. And we sort of started the podcast with like the sole intent being that it was another platform for us to share with our individual audiences on a collective platform. And it was really just like, hey guys, we're here for you. Let us know what you want to know more about, whether you're a fitness professional and you feel like you don't have the education that you should, because there's a lot of those out there. Or if you're, some other professional, a stay-at-home mom or a teenager, and you just don't know where to start or you're completely lost. We wanted to provide as much information from like basic to complex, whatever it would be, to as many people as wanted to hear it. So if we got enough requests, or even if it was like at the beginning, if it was one request, then we were going to make that episode. But if enough people were looking for it, then it's clearly meaningful. It's clearly important. It's something they want to hear. And we're going to make that episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can go ahead and maybe
please.
Just to jump in on that. Definitely I feel like there's this collective intelligence about what's popular at the time. We always have those fad diets that are popular at a time, and you kind of just know based upon what the trends are, what people are struggling with. And I think the most simplistic one, like of recent, is, you know, the home training. Like people are stuck at home and they need to know how to train from home and how to change their diets for this time period. So that's an easy thing to pick up on. And we both have, you know, one-on-one clients we work with. We both had a lot of group fitness clients, and generally people ask the same questions and they just need to be reminded and motivated to look back at what they kind of already know, but just need to be reminded of. And a lot of things too, like in the beginning, it was kind of difficult because it's like, dang, where do we start? There's so many things that people need to know. So we started very basic, like metabolism, and then we went into macros individually. And we do try to keep things short form. So we aim to have our podcast around like under 30 minutes, just because we do know that, you know, like even though podcast is generally where you're going to keep people's attention the longest, you still want to make sure you get your information across in a way that they can really remember things.
Yeah. And then even more recently, we started sort of playing around with doing some of the podcasts live on Instagram while we were doing the actual recording.
Oh my gosh.
And that was, I mean, it was definitely a learning experience for sure. But the reasoning for that was kind of the same thing too, because we want to make each episode as personal as possible and like to the point based on what our audience wants to hear. So we figured if we did the lives, then at least people could tune in if they wanted to. And if they weren't getting their questions answered, they would actually have the opportunity to, you know, throw a comment up on the screen, and we're glancing over as we're talking. We can sometimes, you know, actually call the person out by name if we know them personally, but address that specific topic so that each and every episode is as personalized as it can be.
Super cool. Christine, Brian, did you have anything else to add on there on community? I know that's been built in different ways with so many people.
All right. So here's what I would say with everyone that we talk about when we do our workshops is that you have a purpose, right? Are you someone that's a business owner? Are you someone that is looking to grow your network in your area? Do you have a brick and mortar? Is that your focus? Or are you looking for something worldwide? We have listeners that are all over the world, as opposed to we talk to people that say, you know, we have this gym facility and we want to come on every Friday for all of our members and give you a fitness tip of the day and, you know, really build that kind of community and culture. So I think that that's number one that you have to think about. And kind of what you were saying for us when we book people, I know how you were saying that, you know, what are the trends, what we talk about. Brian used to tell me that and he still does sometimes, that I stalk people and on social media or whatnot, because if that person fascinates me, I want to freaking talk to them and I want to be friends with them. Like, look at what that person did. And social media really takes you and gives you that connection to all these people that you may think are famous or this or that, and ask and you shall receive sometimes. And, you know, I'll look and be like, wow, Brian, like I just reached out to this person. And he's like, what? Because and they'll come on the show sometimes and they'll be like, how did you find me? And I'm like, because you look awesome and you're fascinating. And I want to hear what the freak makes you tick.
She's like a LinkedIn hound dog.
But it's true. I mean, and that's, if it's fascinating to you, then it's going to be fascinating to your listeners. And by the way, it's your show. So
that's the one thing that I would say. And that's what, you know, when this topic first came up here, the brand is the podcast and the podcast is the brand, and that image and all of us, that's the brand. We both have our own companies that we actually started off. Our advertising was our companies, mm-hmm. right? You know, shout out to High Five Health and Fitness and Conti Fit. And, you know,
and you say it and you pump it like Pound, like, you know, what you guys do.
We were promoting our businesses through our podcast, but the podcast itself is the entity, which is now, you know, we've turned it into a podcast. We have Two Fit Crazy Productions, so we're producing other people's podcasts. And it's just, that business in itself has just grown into something, you know, a little bit more beyond that. So don't limit yourselves with it. Be big.
I want to leave time for questions. But I do have one, or kind of like two in one more. So go ahead, and as you're listening, start dropping some questions in the chat while we're going through this one. But surprises and top lessons that you've learned in podcasting land so far, things that you didn't expect, And I think it's really fascinating that all of the people on this episode are also successful entrepreneurs in the fitness and wellness landscape, especially coming from that entrepreneurial business owner and executive perspective. And we'll go ahead and start with Kirsten.
I'm glad you asked that, because what you just said about reaching out to people, I have a thing at Pound HQ here. It's #JustAsk, because you will be surprised how many times somebody will say yes to negotiating, to being on your show, whatever that may be. And I think that is the biggest surprise that I've had with the Big Green Couch, is who has said yes to being on it. And there's a lot of people who that really inspire me, that I thought were really big names that wouldn't come on the show, and we simply asked and they said yes. And that's such a special opportunity. So don't be afraid to ask all of your favorite people to be on your podcast when you start. I'm trying to think of other surprises that do not have to do with audio or visual issues. But I think getting
those are helpful, by the way. The audio, visual, those are real. They're very real.
I'll say this because of where we're at in the world right now. I have been very verbal about this for my entire career, with virtual trainings, with anything virtual. I believe in human connection. I believe that magic happens when you put people in a room and force them to connect with each other. So doing anything virtual has always felt so off for me. And, when the stay-at-home orders began, we had to pivot as a company, and we now do virtual trainings. And of course, classes are being taught virtually, and we've done a few podcasts that are virtual. And I have to say that although it was a surprise and a little bit of a bump in the road, I have been surprised at the connections that are still able to be made. The experience feels just as connected and real as they did in person. And so that's been a pleasant surprise. And I think that that's another cool thing about podcasts, right? We don't have to be in person to connect with somebody that might be across the world. So yeah, those are mine.
Super helpful. Christine, Brian.
Always press record. Right? It doesn't always happen. But you know what? Here's the funny thing. I'm
curious as to see what you're going to say about this.
No, one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to is Rich Roll. He's an endurance athlete, plant-based nutrition guy, and he's fascinating. He's very good at what he does. And
you're invited, Rich.
Yeah,
you got a spot for you.
Yeah, we got a spot for you. And we, and I've listened to him again long before I even had our own podcast. And he just did a podcast that I couldn't wait for. It was COVID related and the whole thing. And he says right before he's on camera, and he says, I just have to warn you. He says, we just did this via Zoom, and I actually forgot to hit record on the video part of it. So just bear with us for the first 3 minutes, and then everything's fine after that. And just smooth. It was like, hey, I made a mistake, owned it, and here you go. And I watched in the first 3 minutes. I couldn't see the guy, and then the next, for the rest of the episode, I could. You're gonna make mistakes. That's okay. We had one episode where I couldn't figure it out.
This was great.
The recording was just like in 3 times speed. So I do all the production for the show. Christine does all the booking. Christine does all the show notes. Christine does all that stuff. I do all the production for it. And I'm like pulling my hair out, like trying to actually have hair. And I'm trying to get it to go. And finally, then it sounds like, so it's a mess. But you're going to make mistakes, but don't let it stop you from doing what you're doing.
Rock on. Laura, Steven, surprises, big lessons.
Our surprises are going to be smaller surprises, probably just because of our stage in the game. But as simple as it sounds, I think one of the things that surprised me, honestly, was just we had a little bit of difficulty figuring out, like I said, our dynamic when we were doing the recordings, and just thinking back to all that we've done, all the teaching that we've done, the audiences we've been in front front of, I never would have guessed in a million years, like, I'm not going to have trouble talking to you of all people. and it was really hard. Like, we're just in a room by ourselves, not in front of the group, and looking at a screen talking. And this is like the hardest thing I've done all year. So yeah, that definitely surprised me. Learning how to talk to my best friend all over again in a new setting was a little bit of a struggle.
I think what he meant is, like, we're both professionals, right? It's hard when you have two teachers trying to teach people, because it's like, I don't want to step on his toes, he's on some of my toes, and we're both like, oh, I'm the professional here, you know. So it's like, but we definitely did. We learned to have a dynamic that we could be like together and teaching people, and also remembering who we're talking to, right? Because there is no one in the room, so you do have to remember your audience at all times. Like, we sometimes stray into thinking we're talking to trainers versus thinking we're talking to a group fitness person versus thinking we're talking to someone who's like never stepped in a gym. So we just got to remember who our audience is.
Yeah, and kind of remembering that, yes, we're both professionals, but don't take yourself too seriously, because a lot of people aren't probably taking you all that seriously. And at the end of the day, you know, they just want to feel like you're someone they can relate to, and you're giving them some little bit of value in whatever you're talking about.
That's really, really valuable. I got a private question, and yes, feel free to drop me, you know, or any of us questions privately if you don't want to shoot it to everybody. How do you maintain an interactive audience when podcasts are pre-recorded? How do you get followers to be active?
Take it. I think that's where the social media comes into play. Mm-hmm. You know, in between episodes, you've got to be active. You've got to post it everywhere. You know, you've got to be on all the platforms.
When you first start, you know what I will say? When you first start, and I know maybe this doesn't sound that great, but you want to bring on guests that are really excited to be on your show. Guests that are going to promote that they're on there. Sometimes we get guests on our show and we'll be like, Brian, this person's more excited that they're on our show than I think we're excited, and we love podcasting. Those are the people that are going to sing, you know, from the rooftops. I know, you know, we have a podcast later today, and, you know, the person's been like promoting on social media, on their platforms. Oh, we can't wait to be on here, blah, blah, blah. Their, you know, their followers, whoever they are, share. And I think that's important when you first start. Not that you don't want, you know, your best friend Sally from grade school to be on there, but think about their network and how maybe their network, you can also use that as well, right?
Well, yeah, one other thing that I'll say on top of that is put out really quality show notes. Make sure that you have good search engine optimized, you know, optimization quality show notes. So that way, if somebody does search something in the guest name or anything, a topic or anything like that, it comes up. You know, that is really important. And that came from a mentor of mine in the podcast industry who's been doing this a long time, and he's got a show that's gigantic, you know, on RVs and camping of all things. But, you know, he said, make sure you do it. It's a blog post that is tied to your show, and that the blog has to, you know, that they're search blogs just as much as they're searching the show itself.
That's really interesting. And not something that I would have thought about. Anybody else have strong feelings on how to maintain an interactive audience and getting followers to be active?
I just think social media is always the most obvious extension of any brand, and it's a way that you can have one-on-one and immediate communication with your community. But I also really love the idea of including live in your podcast and having people interact with you. I've seen it, I think, but I haven't heard of it a ton, and I really think that's a great idea. Anytime, we've been doing a lot of lives, of course, with Pound because of everything that's going on. And it's a great way to interact and feel like you have that one-on-one time with people, as well as things like Zoom. So I love that idea as well.
Yeah, and something you can do on Instagram is when you post about your podcast, whatever topic you're going to be sharing about, tag other people in there who are like, you know, maybe they're your family members, your best friends, or anyone who really knows you, that they will reshare that post to their story too. So you can do a lot in Instagram to promote it. Like, individually is the best way. So don't just put it on your story, like send it out to people in the DMs, and then also tag people who will repost it on their end. and then, you know, just be as consistent as possible, because I promise you, if you keep showing up on the same day every week, eventually your social media is going to, the right people are going to find you. And even in the beginning, if it's small, if you keep doing it, like anything else, like you guys are saying, you know, with all your fitness goals and everything, you just have to be consistent, and showing up for them, they'll show up for you too.
I also have noticed that some people are starting to take their Zoom recordings, and so when you record on Zoom, you have a video component and you also have a separate audio component. So taking that audio component, and if that conversation is well formatted to a podcast, that can work as well. And with the interactivity, naturally you have a lot of people who are there live who are asking questions. So I think, you know, maybe that's a viable possibility. Can you guys, this is from Alex, discuss your artwork and how you decided on it? I feel like that is something that can really deter people from starting to listen. Strong feelings?
Yes.
Deter? I don't know what that's about.
Shout out to my friend Joe Cherry, who's like, you know, was the guy who, when I said we're starting this podcast, he's like, you need artwork, here it is. And he took some pictures off of like Facebook and stuff of me running, Christine doing yoga, and me making a silly face. And he put it together in this artwork, and he's the best. He's my old college roommate, and he just kind of whipped it up for us. But it's strong. It's, you know, it's a brand. It's something that people recognize now. It's something that
Our business cards are the same square. That, you know, kind of keeping things consistent.
And it's you know, so it's just it's really important. And he made one for me this week. I started a podcast with my 11-year-old on WWE wrestling called The Jobber in the Face. Look out. So yeah, it's so he just kind of puts these things together, but it's important, you know, just like it is with any brand of marketing. It's a visual.
For us, it had to fit within the umbrella and the branding and the ethos of what the Pound brand was. So kudos to our marketing and design team. We wanted to make sure that it could sit on its own, but also if somebody saw it, they would immediately recognize that it sat under our brand. So it was a little bit more tricky, but it's one of my favorite parts of creating. Branding is just fun.
Cool.
And yeah, I mean, I say for us, this is like almost embarrassing to say, it's probably the thing we put the least amount of effort into, because it was like the last thing we did. And I think I made it in like 5 minutes probably, which, you know, and actually the first image we had put up, we had photoshopped it ourselves, and we had like cut out the background, right? There's an app, just erase the background. Very easy. Easiest thing to do to make an image is have a really sharp picture of you and then your podcast name. And that's what we did. So took out the background, and we didn't even realize it at first, but like part of Steven's arm was missing. So it looked like he had like a bite out of his arm. And like the first thing people sent us back on our podcast wasn't like, oh, that was a great podcast. It was like Steven's arm was missing in the photo. So yeah, one of my other friends who's much better at Photoshop immediately fixed it for us. And yeah, I mean, it's just like a color that we like. Our color is blue, and we have a really clear image of us, and that's kind of just what we stuck with. So I'd say with art, it's always going to be, you know, something you can make better, something you can work on, spend forever. It's very, you know, it depends on the eye that's looking at it. So just do something that you like that stands out, you know.
That's simple.
Really awesome. Kirsten, were you saying something?
I just said, and keep it simple.
That's helpful. More of a comment than a question from Renee. Thank you for sharing. It really reminds me not to be scared to start a podcast, to just do it. All the things each of you shared really was helpful and inspiring. And I know that we are at about time. I think that is a great note to dovetail on, but I wanted to make sure that if there are ways that anybody can get in touch with you, follow you, in addition to the podcast, The Big Green Couch, Soulfit Labs, and Two Fit Crazies, and Two Fit Crazy Productions, where can they find all of you, engage with you?
Should I go first?
Go ahead.
You can, so other than The Big Green Couch, you can find me at Kirsten Potenza. So it's KirstenPotenza, or Pound Fit, POUND. FIT. We're actually in the middle of a 30-day challenge that you can still join if you'd like.
Sweet.
All right, so I'm if you want to find out all the chaos in my life, it's contifit.com, CONTIFIT.com, and then of course 2fitcrazies.com is our website. And remember, Crazies is spelled a little crazy. Yes, a little crazy. So 2fitcrazies.com, and then on contifit.com is all my info. And then Brian, I'll let you say your own.
Brian at highfivehealthandfitness.com.
Rock on.
Yeah.
Stephen, Laura.
But 2fitcrazies.com is the place.
Hashtag at.
Yeah.
All of the hashtags and ads and handles.
Yeah.
And then for us, other than, we could give you 3 Instagrams. We have one for Soulfit, so you could go to Soulfit_labs, and that's our business Instagram. My personal is my name, Stephen with a V, last name Haahr Fitness. And
mine is Laura_Lucas_fitness. But yeah, I think.
And then website, we also have a soulfitlabs.com. You guys want to check that out.
And we just started a YouTube channel. So that is Soulfit Labs on YouTube.
Just Google Soulfit to find it all.
All the channels. Well, I'm super, super glad. And Maria also dropped a link in the group chat for Pound. But I wanted to thank everybody, all of our guests, as well as all of our audience members for jumping on today. We really want to honor that time and make sure that you've gotten the most out of this session. And with that, I hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll be posting this online as well as sending you all the link after the fact. I'll see you.
Amira, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys. Let us know.